Am I? Oh, oh.
Oh no.
Hello and welcome to the second edition of Yesterday and Today. I'll introduce everyone on the screen. From my left, we have Shane. Say hello, Shane.
Hi.
And then we've got Maddy.
Hey.
And we've got Maya.
Oh.
And we have a new addition to the group. This is Joshua.
Hello.
Okay, so thank you to everybody who sent their comments in and everybody who contacted me personally and gave our comments. At some point, maybe we'll start reading comments out, or we'll comment on comments. But for now, we're going to get right on with it because it's taken quite a long time to get to this point where we could do episode 2. So I don't want to waste any more time. The album that we've all been listening to and that you'll be hearing about today is the absolute stone cold classic by the Eagles, Hotel California. Okay, so who wants to go first?
I guess I'll go first again.
Okay, Shane, you've been nominated and you volunteered. So Shane,
Okay.
I'll be asking everyone the same set of questions, perhaps in slightly different ways, but what were your initial thoughts about the album? Did you enjoy it? Did you come to it with any expectations? What did you think?
Yes, I've heard it before because I played Hotel California at like a gig once. So I'd heard Hotel California, but I hadn't really heard any of the other songs. So it was nice to listen to the full album, I thought, at least.
Ah, so you hadn't heard any of the other songs apart from the title track?
No, none of the other ones until like I listened to them.
Okay. And did anything stand out for you? What was your, I mean, the whole thing about albums is that, you know, they were very carefully and precisely programmed to run a certain way and to take you on a journey. Did you get any of that effect?
Well, so probably the two ones which was the kind of like in between songs was the most shocking was kind of Wasted Time and then the orchestral reprise and then straight away going into Victim of Love, because Victim of Love is like kind of quite aggressive, and from the orchestral reprise, which is quite like calming, I thought that was quite like, it took me back. I got taken aback basically when I first heard it. I was like,
really? So that came as a complete surprise to you, and you hadn't heard anything like that before, like a kind of that was a real like musical surprise to you?
I think so. I mean, maybe it was just because I wasn't expecting it. It was like, but I mean, I think that in terms, yeah, that's probably one of the things that was the most kind of surprising. But I have some notes on like individual songs.
Okay, we'll get to that in the next section if that's okay. I want to quickly move on to.
Can I just come?
Yeah, sorry, go on. Yeah, sure.
I was going to say with Victim of Love, I was doing a little bit. I don't want to steal Mo's like context piece, but I was looking into it because it was a bit different to the rest. And apparently, it wasn't like supposed to be on the album. I don't think originally.
Oh.
I think it was like his name is Don Felder.
Yeah,
that's the one. It was him who was like pushing it to be on the album. Apparently the other bandmates weren't really too keen on it. They didn't think the vocals were like top quality. So I think that maybe could be why that was a bit of a shock when Shane heard it. Maybe it wasn't.
That's interesting because I think it's very important to, and thank you. I'm glad that you have been doing a bit of research. That's really good. That saves me interjecting and giving that context. But it is important to remember that Wasted Time would have been the final track on side 1. So we would have put the album on. That's the flat surface of the album. We would have put the needle on. The needle would have run to the end of side 1, and then we would have flipped the album over. And the first thing we would have heard was that beautiful string reprise of the melodies and the motifs of Wasted Time. So actually, this is the thing about the journey. You know, Wasted Time, which is one of my favourite songs ever. I think it's absolutely beautiful. But then the beauty continues in that surprising way with that orchestral restatement of all the melodies and the themes. Okay, so Maddy, we might as well move on to you. What were your initial thoughts on the album as a whole before we get into individual tracks?
Well, similar to Shane, I'd only heard the title track before, and I might have heard the others in passing, but I hadn't listened to the album in like a sequence, if that makes sense. But I really liked it. I've listened to it a couple times, and the more I've listened to it, the more I've enjoyed it as a whole. But there are some songs which we'll go into later. There are some songs that I've like not enjoyed less, but they've become a bit more boring now that I've listened to them a few more times. But I think also as well, I have a preference to side 1 than side 2, which might be contradictory to others' opinions.
Well, no, that doesn't matter. You know, the whole thing about music is it's about that personal response.
I prefer the first side, I think, to this. Actually, that's such a lie. That is such a lie. I have likes. Completely ignore what I've just said there. I actually changed my mind when I listened to it a couple more times.
Well, you know, you bring up a very, very important point about albums, and we should go a little bit into the context of this because it will make a big difference to how you think of it in the future. The Eagles were an incredibly successful band by the time they got to Hotel California. I think this is their fifth album. Is it fifth or fourth album? Let me just do a bit of double checking on my. It's the fifth album, yeah. So they had hit singles, and they were already touring internationally and selling big venues. And they were a slightly different American rock band in that their influences were less kind of blues and that kind of 60s British blues rock, and much more rock and country. So they were bringing this whole kind of Western imagery, country vocals, country harmonies, country chord progressions, and this imagery of the West, which you don't hear quite as much on Hotel California, but you certainly hear on their previous albums, talking about, you know, gunslingers and cowboys and all sorts of things. My favourite, probably in my top 5 songs ever, is Desperado by the Eagles, which is about a cowboy. So the Eagles their influences and what they brought to the table were very different to a lot of other bands at that time who were what they call album-orientated bands. So although album-orientated bands had hit singles, their main market was selling albums and playing live and playing big venues internationally. So the Eagles fit into that kind of category. Okay, are we ready? Maya, do you wanna go next with your initial thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I liked the album. I also liked Maddy and Shane. I only listened to Hotel California. Like, I didn't actually sit down and listen to the whole album. I was kind of taken aback by Wasted Time and how less rock it was, the album, but there was a lot of like country influences in it. And Wasted Time, especially the reprise with the orchestral thing. As a whole, I think so. It's a good album, and it did take me on a journey, I guess. And it kept going up and down between like intense songs, and so it was a whole array of emotions while I was listening to that.
That's interesting that you say the word emotions. Can you talk a little bit more about emotions?
Like Hotel California, it has a bit of a nostalgic feel to it, even though it's not nostalgic for me, but you know what I mean. And then the faster songs kind of get me excited and they make me want to like move around. But then for Wasted Time, it's not sad, but I mean, I guess it is sad. And so you want to sit down and listen to it, and then you like Woken Up Again by Victim of Love. Like it's a whole, it keeps going up and down. Yeah.
That's interesting that this is something that maybe in future we can discuss in a bit more depth, is the emotional content, how the music affects your emotions. Because I think that's actually the primary the real goal of music is to move you emotionally. Wasted Time moves me immeasurably, actually. It's one of my favourite songs that helped me through a very bad breakup, going back 25 years. But also, it's a beautiful song. It's just a beautiful song because emotions are actually universal amongst human beings. They're universal. Everybody kind of feels the same way. If you've experienced heartbreak, you experience it roughly in the same way. And we'll maybe talk about that when we come to individual tracks. Okay, Josh, welcome, Josh.
Hello.
Over to you. What are your initial thoughts?
Well,
Ooh, I feel very underprepared here.
that's okay. With Hotel California, I've heard it many a times before, so listening to this, I didn't really have a fresh mind because I've heard most of the songs in the past.
And why have you heard it so? Why are you so familiar with it? Give us a little bit of the history of Josh.
Well, my old drum teacher is still in a Illegal Eagles cover tribute band, if I can say that, where I have gone and seen them live a couple of times. And they cover quite a large catalogue from the Hotel California album.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I've got to let Shane, Maddy, and Maya into this. I kind of know the connection with Josh and the Eagles because the person he's talking about, Josh's old drum teacher, is a very, 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 very good friend of mine called Trevor Newnham. Hello, Trev Ski. If you're ever watching this, I want to say a big hello. Trevor is a fantastic bass player, one of my favourite bass players to play with. He's an incredible singer. And he's just an all-round good guy, very funny and all those kind of things. And Josh is actually one of Josh's parents are good friends with Trev. Is that right, Josh?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's where the connection came. Trevor basically recommended that Josh get involved. And I was surprised to hear that Trevor was actually a drum teacher as well. But it doesn't surprise me because Trevor is a fantastic musician and so that's another string to his bow. So Trevor is in this band, which is very popular in England and tours regularly, called the Illegal Eagles. So they play Eagles material. And I recommend that the next time they're playing near London and we're all around, we should go and see them. Yeah. Okay, so this is something that an album, Josh, that you know very, very well. And even though you've heard it many, many times, does it still excite you? Do you still get engaged with it? Do you still feel the same way when you listen to the tracks?
Well, yeah, because I agree with everybody what I've said so far about the music journey, about how it flows in and out of different songs, like fast, slow, and then the difference between the wasted time and the reprise. I don't know how you say that.
Reprise. It has been annoying me so much. Everyone reprise.
It is reprise, yeah. It's reprise. Okay, all right. So let's move on to standout tracks. And I do mean standout. I think all the tracks on the album are great, but there are some that stand out for me. Josh, let's stay with you. What are your standout tracks?
Standout track 1 would be Wasted Time. Well, it's a ballad and a feel-good song, which is very good. It's got lovely harmonies in it, which are tight and compact. As like little to no instruments, focusing on like the piano and the vocals. And then number 2, which is on the B side of the album, I think. Pretty Maids All in a Row, which is it's a unknown song, if I should say that. Which it like again focuses on the slow pace part of the album.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention Pretty Maids All in a Row, actually, Josh, because so I heard Hotel California back when it came out, and of course certain tracks I'm very, very, very familiar with. But Pretty Maids All in a Row, so I haven't listened to the album in its entirety until recently, for many decades, 30 years I haven't listened to the whole album. So re-listening to Pretty Maids All in a Row reminded me, it's very, very similar to another one of my favourite artists called Todd Rundgren. Todd Rundgren is an incredibly prolific songwriter, guitarist, producer, and a quirky, eccentric space cadet who I absolutely love. His music is very odd. He can go from prog rock instrumental ridiculousness to beautiful piano ballads that will make you cry. And Pretty Maids All in a Row really reminded me of a certain type of Todd Rundgren song. So it's interesting that you picked that one out. Okay, moving on to Maya. Standout tracks, particular favourites?
Not to be redundant, but like wasted time. Just because I don't know, it slows you, it like calms you down in the middle. It's kind of in the middle in the album. I don't know what number track it is. But
It's like halfway.
The last one on the A side, right? So it's the
Yeah.
last thing you hear before you flip over.
It's
to
like
the
Number
side.
four.
4.
Four, it's just a beautiful song, honestly. And I don't know, it's just, yeah. And I still think after listening to the whole album that Hotel California is one of the best ones on there. Like maybe because I've listened to it like the most often, so it's kind of stuck in my head, but it's still one of the best songs, obviously one of the best solos, if not the best solo on guitar. Obviously you've mentioned that many times, Mo.
Well, again, this is something that's worth discussing actually. That when it comes to in music, the word best is incredibly difficult to quantify because music affects different people in different ways. So I personally would never say that something was the best or that somebody was the best. But Hotel California, the track, has been voted by, let's do this properly. I just want to find the actual Wikipedia entry for this. The song itself, it was in the number one, it has been voted by the readers of Guitar Player as the best guitar solo. Guitar Player is a British magazine. And it was voted the best guitar solo of all time by...
Of all time?
Of all time by Guitar Player. Guitarist.
That's a very bold statement to make.
It is. As is anything when it comes to the best. This is why I'm using air quotes. The word best is very difficult to quantify. However, it can be said that from the minute Hotel California came out, from the very, very first day that it was released, guitarists, all of us, and I was probably 14 at the time, 13 or 14, we were absolutely stunned. The solo, the sound, the twin guitar thing. I'm sure you guys are aware that there are actually two guitarists playing that song.
Yeah. I think there was another. Oh, yeah. Life in the Fast Lane. Just to harp on that, two guitarists. There are two different guitarists playing two different solos, and they like switch between. It's so cool.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite parts.
Yeah. So as a record for guitar players, Hotel California is incredibly important, as are so many other albums from that time. So yes, and I of course I agree with you about Wasted Time, Maya. It's an incredible, beautiful song. Okay, moving on to Maddy.
Well, contrasting, I'm not going to say Wasted Time. Even though it's a ballad, which is normally what I would go for, I actually preferred Life in the Fast Lane as my favourite. That I just, personally think it was like one of the like stronger songs in the album. I don't know if it's just because when I listened to it, I was just walking down the street and the first time I listened to it, I was like, I dressed up to go out and I was walking down the street with it in my earphones and I was just like, oh, it's really getting me into the mood for the rest of the day, feeling very main character energy. But
main character energy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, mine is what I'm on about.
That's like a kind of film analogy.
Yeah, main character energy. That is what you will hear this many a time from me. Life in the Fast Lane gives main character energy.
But it's like the scene from Spider-Man where he's walking down in Spider-Man 3 where he's walking down the street and doing like the finger guns.
Hey, I like it. I like it. I like to think my life is a movie anyway, so it's fine. So carry on.
Maddy. Perfect soundtrack, not sidetrack, soundtrack. And again, like I think as Seamus said, like the guitar solo, the way I love the guitar in Life in the Fast Lane. I think I actually may or may not mention this to Mo for guitar lesson. But I just think it's a really good song. And I think when I did some extra context research as well, he got the idea from it apparently when he was, I don't know if we have like drug warning, he was on cocaine driving like 160 miles per hour on a highway, and that's where like the idea came to him. And I find that like quite interesting when you think of the song. It's like, oh wow, he was really in that zone.
In the fast lane.
Yeah. Well, there is one thing, and again, we're gonna have to. I mean, there's no escaping this topic when it comes to music. Even going back to the times of Beethoven and Mozart and all those guys, but especially in contemporary and popular music, there is no escaping the role that recreational pharmaceuticals played in people's lives and careers. The Eagles were famous even at the time for living the absolute kind of stereotypical rock and roll life. You know,
Recreational pharmaceuticals.
I think that's the phrase that we, in order to.
Is that the British way to say it?
Pharmaceutical warning.
So, what did you say, Maya?
I said, is that the British way to say it?
No,
It's just a way to get. It's a way to get around like any kind of censorship.
Well, it's my way of diplomatically and tactfully referencing the articles without Pardon?
Nothing.
But the Eagles were, huge on that side of things.
Anyway,
yeah.
Honorary mentions, last two I'm going to like honorary standout songs. I'm going to go with Victim of Love and Try and Love Again.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Slide those to
Try to Love Again is great, actually. Fantastic chorus.
I think it's very underrated. The first couple times I listened to the album, I didn't really listen to it, but I did listen to it, but I didn't really pay attention to it much. I like it a lot now.
I agree.
It's interesting what you're kind of saying, because what's emerging is that the more you listen to stuff, quite often the more you kind of get it and you're engaging with it, and that's called albums were always growers. Albums grew on you. What were you going to say, Maddy?
I was saying with some songs, in other respects, though, when I've listened to the album a couple more times, other songs I've gone off more. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to Shane. Shane, your standout tracks, if any.
So I think my three probably standout would have to be Life in the Fast Lane, Victim of Love, and then Hotel California. Kind of all of the ones which to me are the, like more exciting. I don't really listen to a lot of like ballads because I just don't. It doesn't spark an emotional connection at all. So I just kind of it kind of gets boring to me sometimes. If I'm like even when I've been at my lowest, I've just always turned to like more exciting music to try and like bring myself up instead of relishing in the kind of misery, I guess, of a ballad. So I guess so for Life in the Fast Lane, kind of I was saying about the kind of two guitar solos really struck me. Obviously the intro guitar riff. I just felt that like it was overall kind of more like almost aggressive song compared to especially coming from New Kid in Town, which was really country, like so much country twang on so many of those lyrics. So and like some like other techniques like flanger and some other stuff. Then I'd say Victim of Love again, that struck me because coming from the orchestral reprise, which was really mellow, it's just like straight away, like really, really goes like pretty hard with like the drums and stuff. The lyrics as well are quite I think I'm pretty sure is he accusing like a woman of like lying to him or something. It seems to be like it kind of adds to that accusatory kind of feel. I feel like the way that they play really adds to that.
Yeah,
the drums,
kind of,
Yeah,
sorry,
the
I was
drums
about to say, like, I kind of saw it as him like victimizing himself, like playing the victim.
yeah,
Yeah,
I guess, yeah.
as in like agreeing with like the woman lying to him, and he's then feeling victimized.
Yeah. So it's interesting what you said about Life in the Fast Lane coming after New Kid in Town. Actually, New Kid in Town was the first single from this album, and it was a big hit single. It did very, very well. I'll look up exactly where it was in the charts, but New Kid in Town was on the radio the whole time, for ages and ages. So the way things would work in those days was that singles were, you had bands that were singles bands and their albums didn't do very well, and you had bands that released singles as a kind of preview of the album because they were really album bands. So a singles band from that kind of time we might think of as someone like Mud. There was a band called Mud, and then there was a band called Shabadi Wadi. If you ever look them up, and they just produced singles. They didn't really play live, and their albums the albums kind of came and went. But bands like the Eagles released singles to let you know that an album was coming out. And what would normally happen was the single would be released about maybe 6 weeks before the album was due, and then that single would have a life of sales and radio play. Then the album would come out, and they would release another single from that album, and then the cycle would start again. So Hotel California was actually the second single from this album.
I feel like New Kid in Town kind of paints almost not the wrong image, but it's almost deceiving the audience because you expect it. Because New Kid in Town, like you said, their first couple albums were much more country, and New Kid in Town is really country, and none of the other songs are very country at all, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah,
so
New Kid in Town was harking back to their country roots, but Hotel California was very definitely an attempt to broaden their audience into the rock audience. They had a new guitar player called Joe Walsh, who was in a kind of rocky, bluesy band before. And yeah, they were really opening things up into a different level for them. And it worked. It really worked. The album sold 32 million copies. And it's certified 26 times platinum in America. That's a lot of records sold. In the days when you actually had to hand over a $5 for an album, that's a lot of fivers.
Yeah,
No, go on.
You say that like maybe putting out a New Kid in Town first because it was more of that kind of like harking back to their old country roots. It probably meant that when Hotel California came out, it was probably more surprising. That's probably why it was even more of a bigger shock to the music scene.
Yeah, quite possibly.
It was more of a shock because it was like again, like a New Kid in Town doesn't really paint the impression that the rest of the album kind of does.
Yeah. So now that we've figured out temporal reality, we're going to move on to the final couple of sections of this particular look at Hotel California. And the first thing is just final thoughts, a roundup of final thoughts, things that you wanted to say that you maybe didn't say before. Let's go to, first of all, let's maybe go to Maddy. Is there anything that you wanted to say that you hadn't said before, something that's occurred to you? Off you go. Anything?
You never start on me. That was interesting. No, I think I forgot to mention actually with Hotel California, I actually agree with I think it was Maya that said it, I could be wrong, about it still being one of like the better tracks. I think there is something just, again, it has very main character energy, very strong main character energy when you're listening to Hotel California. And I just think, yes?
No, you go ahead, you finish off.
It was completely unrelated, so if it's related to my last sentence.
I was going to say that Hotel California, the imagery is very, very cinematic, actually. It really paints a picture.
Actually, it was quite related then. I was going to say, like, the lyrics, some of the lyrics were just very, I don't know, I love some of the lyrics. There's been thing like, mirrors on the ceiling, pink champagne on ice, some dance to remember, some dance to forget. It was just very, I like the lyrics a lot. I think actually some of the lyrics in the album surprised me. I didn't think I'd like them a lot. And I listen to lyrics a lot more than I listen to melody, I think, in music typically. I normally go for things I prefer the lyrics to. So it actually kind of was interesting.
I was going to add to that, kind of Hotel California kind of felt like um, it was like a story of a guy getting lost in it, basically getting lost in the magic of like going to this hotel and all of the things that he did, and it kind of developed in that way. I feel, at least, you know.
Yeah, I should say something about lyrics actually, and about the album generally. The album is kind of a concept album. So concept albums were really big from around the late 60s all the way through the 70s. Lots of bands did concept albums, and they didn't have to be, and by concept, it didn't necessarily mean that it was the same story running through all the tracks. Like there's an album called Tommy by The Who, which is a double album, so it's two 12-inch vinyl albums, and it is the story of Tommy from beginning to end. So every track is related. They called it a rock opera. But the concept behind Hotel California is not that all the tracks are telling the same story, but all the tracks reflect experiences that the Eagles were having, primarily to do with things like fame, success, really big issues. Fame, success, the loss of innocence, which is a really, really huge thing when you start becoming an adult. You know, you're an adult and everything's different and confusing and bewildering and possibly not a lot of fun. In some cases, an awful lot of fun, but in other cases, maybe not a lot of fun. And maybe what you thought was fun isn't really fun. So the Eagles were really looking at all of this because they had experienced huge amounts of success, but they were also very aware that there were loads of other bands coming up, loads of young bands coming up that were looking to take their kind of crown. New Kid on the Block is an essay on that kind of idea. So Hotel California, the track, is still to this day incredibly mysterious because nobody really knows what they mean or what they're describing in detail. So it's more of an atmosphere. And also songwriters, and we will learn this, and it is an interesting thing to bear in mind, is songwriters, poets and writers generally are very wary of telling you exactly what they mean, because they want you to resonate with whatever it is that you're resonating with in the music. It's a really, really important thing. That's why, books are written about the meanings of songs. And no one really knows, because you bring to it what's inside you, in a way.
It's kind of like your favorite artists, or like, that's why I remember earlier when you were saying about best is really personal, and so it's kind of like the same thing with that. It's like your favorite song is a song that kind of you enjoy listening to the most for whatever reason, but other people don't have to share the same opinion, and that's kind of that's why it's a nice thing about this podcast. We got 4 different people with 4 very different music tastes and 4 very different opinions. There's no one so far has had the same opinion, and that's quite nice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Next on my screen is Josh. Josh, do you want to round up final thoughts? Anything you hadn't forgotten earlier on?
Yes, but adding to what Maddy said about the lyric worthy part of Hotel California, I don't know if this is true or not, but it has a reference to Steely Dan in it, in a line I had it written down. They stab it with their steely knives, but they just can't kill the beast, because them 2 bands had a rivalry at the time. I was listening to a podcast about that, but I don't know whether it's true or not.
Well, whether it's true or not, it's interesting, isn't it? Because Steely Dan were, and now some guys in this group are really familiar with Steely Dan, and some people aren't. And maybe at some point we'll do some Steely Dan, because I'd love to hear what somebody who's never heard Steely Dan before thinks about Steely Dan. Josh, you may need to bring your microphones a bit closer to you, if that's okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So carry on. Yeah.
We was talking about emotions earlier. For me, I didn't really feel emotionally moved with the whole album, even though it should have, in a way. Apart from the reprise. But because it was calming, and it just had strings and the motifs of the song before. Yeah.
It's weird, actually. I kind of agree. I don't think I was massively emotionally moved by all the songs. like the album as a whole, I liked the main character vibes and I liked the liveliness of some of the songs. But apart from that, it wasn't any like, I don't think any of them were particularly hard hitting, contrasting to Mo's Wasted Time.
Well,
But
I think, yeah, you know, I think we've spoken about this individually, that quite often, whatever the art is, and not just songs, but poetry and books and for me, movies, you kind of, they can touch whatever's inside you already if you've had that experience. If you haven't had that experience that particular thing is talking about, you may still appreciate it. It might still be amazing, but the emotional resonance, the connecting of the emotional vibration and frequency and all that may take some time. There are some things that I didn't get until years later. Actually, I could, if we had lots of time, I'd give you a whole list of things that it took me having to go through something to finally get. But this isn't about me. So Maya, what are your final thoughts or summing up?
For some reason, Hotel California sounds nostalgic for me, even though it's not nostalgic since it was written like, I don't know how many years before I was born. But it just has like, it's the kind of song you would listen to on a road trip. It has very like 70s movie soundtrack vibes, very main character energy, definitely. And it's just, yeah. Wasted Time. I think, Mo, you said you relate to it because you went through a breakup. I think because like losing friends, that's why I kind of relate to the lyrics, and that's why I kind of find it a bit nicer. The rest of the songs are like, I appreciate them and I really like them, but I don't particularly like relate to them. And then, which was the one that was political? Because that really shocked me. The
Last Resort.
Last Resort.
Yeah.
I was shocked to find that song talking about political stuff, because usually the songs are like either like about love or about recreational pharmaceuticals. Or
Sorry, I can't take it seriously. Sorry, yes.
I've just got cramped again.
or fame.
Recreational pharmaceuticals, they'll help.
No, that's not an encouragement to take recreational pharmaceuticals, by the way. Caveat. I obviously need to get some potassium in me. My hamstrings cramping. Okay, but less about me. It's interesting that you say that, Maya, actually, because the times were very different. So we have grown up very much so in the modern world with the whole idea about the environment and the ecology and what we now call the green kind of awareness, the green consciousness. But at the time the Eagles were making this kind of album, it was actually very different. It was the beginning of that ecological awareness. But they had also, the Eagles themselves had been kids at the time of like the Vietnam War in the mid-60s and the political upheaval that happened mainly in America, but all over the world because of that war. And the effect that the war and the prospect of having to go to war and serve in the army, that effect that it had on young people, because they didn't want to go to the war and die for reasons that they couldn't quite figure out. But, you know, why were they going to war? They didn't know. It was all muddy. So the mid-60s up to the mid to late 70s was a time of great political awareness amongst young people and in music, and not just on the ecology, but civil rights, kind of personal identity, sexuality. There was a whole slew of things that perhaps today we are a lot more open about and we are maybe more accepting of, that had the seeds of change in the music and the youth of the mid-60s and the 70s. So the Eagles were kind of kickstarting, part of the kickstarting of that environmental awareness that we now take almost for granted, although current developments may be in the future something that we need to relook at. But that's a very good point that you've made. That's an epic track, 7 or 8 minutes long. How long is that? Yeah, 7.5 minutes long, and really taking on the idea that America was conquered. You know. Okay, Shane, Final roundup of thoughts or things you forgot to say or didn't say?
Well, no, I don't think there's anything. I think, yeah, I pretty much said everything.
Okay, that's good.
Maybe, yeah, I'd say the B side was probably my least favorite. By like Try and Love Again and Last Resort, I kind of just didn't really have much to. It didn't like strike me in any way. I didn't even. Maybe I just didn't hear the lyrics, but I didn't even know that it was a political song because I was just like, I don't know. I was just in a weird mood, maybe.
Well, actually, you know, some people take a lot of notice of lyrics and some people don't.
So I think it depends on how many times you listen to the album as well, because I listened to it a couple times, and the first time I listened to it I was kind of bored by the end of the album, because I listened to it all in one go and I was like, oh, this is longer than what I usually do, but I think after I listened to it a couple times, that's when I realized what they were trying to say. So maybe it's just that kind of.
Well, I mean, I listened to it like 5 or 6 times, but I guess it just, I don't know, the songs that really grabbed me were the ones which were like a lot kind of energetic, because I tend to go for music which at least for me like makes me like want to like play or kind of like, you know, tap my feet and stuff like that. The kind of slower songs with don't really listen to them so much, so I guess it was a new experience.
Yeah. And also, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm kind of throwing this open to the whole group, that you are not, as a sort of generation, used to hearing 40 minutes of music in one long go. It's kind of like not the way that you consume music. Is it 40 minutes? Is it correct to say that, or is that me being assumptive?
Well,
I mean, I guess. No, I guess like if you go to a gig or something, you probably would be listening to like consistently. But I guess, at least, I guess for some people, if you only have one song which you like, you're just going to listen to that one song. And because of like Spotify and YouTube and all of these music streaming services, you can listen to just that specific song. But like, you know, on vinyl, you kind of, I don't know, if you're not adept at using vinyl, you can't exactly like, you know, move the needle and kind of know what you're doing. So you're almost forced to listen to it to one side of the vinyl track in one go. You can't, you know, because it's quite easy to scratch and stuff like that. So I guess it's just different mediums mean that we listen to music in a different way nowadays.
Yeah. Maddy, you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say same thing, I think, with like different mediums of listening to music now, but also for me, I think it depends on the artist. So if there's an artist who I know I really like, I probably would listen to the album all in one go, because I want to listen to every single song, because then I'll find which one I like most, if I know I generally like the artist's music. But for example, back in the time when this was released, you'd know what the Eagles were about, but you wouldn't know if you'd like them all. So you'd listen to the whole thing on vinyl. You wouldn't be able to like skip one really quickly if you're getting bored.
No. Yeah, we didn't tend to do that. We would, I mean, you know, I think I've said this before, either individually, and I'll probably say it again in every episode. But we would, you know, a friend would buy an album. We wouldn't always buy the same albums, but one friend would buy an album, and then that friend would invite 2 or 3 of us around to the gaff, and we would dim the lights, put the album on, and we would listen to side 1 in its entirety. Switch to side 2, listen to that, and then we might listen to it again as a group. And then, you know, if you had the album at home, you would listen to, normally I was listening to whole albums, depending on what time of the day and all that kind of stuff. Josh, sorry, I just want to ask a question to the group. How many of you have vinyl and a turntable, or access to vinyl and a turntable?
Not at uni, but yes.
So at home, right. Okay. How many of you, when you have access to that vinyl and that turntable, do you actually listen to vinyl?
If I'm home alone.
Interesting. Okay.
But also, I don't have that many songs that I like on vinyl to put on the player.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the quality is worse. Like I have like a speaker or like my Alexa, and they sound better than the vinyl player, which is honestly more of a gimmick. I think I bought it. To be fair, I think I bought it first for aesthetic reasons more than in the beginning.
Because they look cool, don't they?
They do.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm main character energy when I'm at home and I have the vinyl. Yeah, anyway.
Yes, it's like the Queen's Gambit. Anyways.
Yeah, I should say that I'm not necessarily. I mean, I don't have it. I haven't had vinyl at home for 20 years. I haven't got a turntable, and all my vinyl is in storage. So I'm not, nostalgic about vinyl. I don't have that, but it's a very important thing. When Maddy showed me her copy of A Night at the Opera that she'd found in her grandma's attic, she showed me the copy. It's the first time I'd seen the album in its what we called a gatefold sleeve, a sleeve that opens up. It's the first time I've seen that album in that format, probably in 40 years. And I love that album. And I used to look at that album and read all the lyrics and read all the details and read all the credits and all the, where was it recorded, who the producer was, who the engineer was, what dates it was recorded. I knew all those kind of things. I could still probably delve back into my brain and kind of pick that out. So vinyl has got a massive importance to people who are raised with vinyl as their primary introduction to music. But things have moved on, and I don't even own any CDs. Everything I do is on Spotify, YouTube, or it's on my iTunes collection where I've downloaded my CDs to my computer. Josh, do you actually own lots of vinyl yourself?
Yeah, but I barely listen to them.
So you're still, although you've got them, you still listen to things on streaming services. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. We'll get more into the lives of Maddy, Josh, Maya, and Shane in future editions. But now, I want to move on to marks at the controversial bit. Marks out of 10. Sorry, is someone trying to say something?
I was going to say, speaking of like listening to vinyl and CD, it's kind of a lot rawer, and I mean, especially with CD, like the quality is so much. The volume specifically is way louder. But yeah, I think my dad has a vinyl player and he's got like a ton of vinyl records, but I haven't really ever listened to vinyl except for like when I see someone on this like here they have like an old record shop and there's like kind of went in. I was thinking about buying a vinyl record player, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean the sound quality, it's so different. It's so different.
I like the sound quality
as well.
It's a different experience. You know what? And this is another debate that people of my age kind of have with themselves and amongst themselves. It's not even a debate, it's a view that the sound quality of vinyl has definitely got a lot more bottom end, darker, fatter bass end. And that's something that some of us really, really like, although to me now it's a pointless thing because I don't have any vinyl. Okay, so marks out of 10. Let's start with Shane.
Are we not doing best and worst?
We can do. Do you want to do that? Best and worst? Yeah? Okay, Maddy, go ahead.
I kind of did the best of it.
No, you can't like chuck it at me like that.
Well, you introduced the idea, so you go ahead.
We did it, but last episode.
Okay, then you're right.
Well, best track would probably be Life in the Fast Lane. As I said, I just think that's the strongest song on the album, most energetic and one that kind of got me up. Worst song, in my opinion, actually contrasts to what Josh said. I really didn't like Pretty Maids on the Row. I think that's the right name.
Right.
I actually found it. I listened to it a couple times because I was like, I've heard it's like one of the more underrated ones. I was like, okay, I can't be part of the crowd underrating it. But I really struggled to listen to the whole thing through more than a couple times.
Okay.
Opinion.
All right. And rounding up your marks out of 10 for the whole album, what are you saying?
Oh, we're doing it like that. Okay. I'm gonna go with I think I'm gonna go with a 6.7.
Okay. Let me mark that in. Okay. And so next on my screen is Josh. So Josh, let's talk about. Have you got any least favourites or favourites, and then we'll do marks.
Yeah, my least favorite would be "Try and Love Again." Again, it's an underrated song, but I just didn't. I don't know whether I wasn't concentrating, but it just fell in my I don't like it.
Right.
It just did in my mind. It didn't fit on the album because it was like a ballad, but it was a bit too slow for me.
It's interesting you say that about it fitting on the album, because one of the things that always a massive bone of contention with many bands was about getting a song on the album, because songwriting royalties could make people millionaires purely from writing songs. So if your album sold 32 million copies, you stand to make a lot of money if you've got one song on that album. So that there was probably some kind of political element about songwriting credits. And marks for the whole album, marks out of 10?
I give it an 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10.
Yeah.
Ooh. All right, next on my screen is Maya. Maya, standout track, at least favourites and then marks.
Favorite, I think I've said this way too many times, wasted time. And least favorite, I think New Kid in Town, which is quite controversial, but it's too American for me. It's too country.
It's got the beautiful steel string guitars on that tune. They're played on the lap. They're flat, and they're played with the person who holds a little steel bar in one hand and plucks with finger picks on the other hand. And there's normally 10 strings, and they've got pedals which they press to bend. You know how we would bend a string up with our left hand, or depending on what. Just to explain to people watching this, 3 of the people on the screen are guitarists. Maddy, Maya, and myself play guitar. Josh sings and plays drums. Do you play anything else, Josh?
I play piano as well.
And piano. And Shane plays piano and plays saxophone, and is really into Steely Dan, which is great.
Yes.
So the pedal steel is an incredibly beautiful instrument, and it is used very, very much in country music, in American country music.
Is it like a harp? Is it harpeggi as well, or harpeggi or something like that?
Not sure.
I'll send you a link of there's someone playing it. It's really sick. It's a similar kind of thing, but I don't think it's the same.
Okay, we'll look into that. You might need to spell the word for me. Okay, Maya, marks out of 10.
8.
8. Okay, it's good. Looking good. Eagles are getting the 80 percentile. Okay, we are running out of time, so let's move on to Shane. Shane, what's your final thoughts and your marks?
Not
final thoughts. Least favourite, I think, was the topic.
And most favourite.
And best favourite.
I think I said my most favourite ones already, but it's between Hotel California, Life in the Fast Lane, and Victim of the other one. What's it called? Victim of Love. Yeah, not Wasted Time. My least favourite is probably going to be either Try and Love Again or The Last Resort. It was a similar thing to what Josh was saying. Kind of by the end, it was a bit. I don't know. I just couldn't. I listened to it, but I didn't really have much to say about it, and so it's kind of just. It was quite a strange ending for me because I don't know. I guess it just didn't really click with me that well. I'd say marks out of 10. I'd probably give it maybe. I'd say like a 9 because although there were some songs which I kind of didn't enjoy, I think the album I thought was really good. So
okay,
I increased my rating a little bit purely because I'm thinking ahead to further episodes. They're all going to be coming into comparison here. It's just, if I think about the majority of songs that I liked and disliked, I think there was more that I didn't get into as much. Maybe put it to a 7.1.
7.1. Oh, dramatic changes here.
It's a really dramatic change.
It's a dramatic change. 7.1.
4 points.
Pardon?
Increased it by a whole 0.4 points, Maddy.
Yeah, 0.4. That's pretty big. If that was an election, that would be quite a big swing.
Think about it. It's
Why are you?
Okay, guys, I think we're good there. That's really interesting. Thank you so much. It's always fascinating hearing what you have to say about these albums. You know, from my point of view, this is something that I'm very, very familiar with, although, again, I haven't listened to the album in its entirety for many years. But the sound of the Eagles, the impact it had on my guitar playing and my kind of desire to be a better player, the guitar tones, all the kind of... remember that this was an album played by real musicians and meticulously rehearsed and performed. No computers, no cut and paste, no digital messing around. All real people playing real instruments that are mic'd up in a studio. So for young musicians at the time, this was incredibly inspiring. So, you know, hearing your thoughts 40 odd years later is really interesting. Thank you very much for your time and energy and effort. And I'm going to leave you now, and we're going to say thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please leave comments and anything else you want to say in the appropriate place. And we'll be back with the next edition.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Thank you, Shane. Like and subscribe.
Turn on the notification.
Turn the notification bell if you want to hear more from our lovely team here.
Thank you, everyone. You're much better PR people than I am. So I'm not going to tell you what the next album is. We're going to leave that. I don't think we should do that, should we? We shouldn't say what the next album is at the end of it.
Comment what you think the next album will be.
Oh, good idea. Teasing the audience. What do you think the next album is going to be? Okay, from all of us here, thank you and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. That's good. That's really good.
So much sleep. I really apologize for my behavior.